You can hear the difference between a room laughing and a room laughing at you. My brother heard it too. He was counting on it. At my sister's wedding, in front of 150 guests, Grant stood up, put his hand on the back of my chair, and told me to give my seat to a man I had never met. Someone who actually mattered tonight. Then he lifted his glass and told the room that every family needs one son who never amounts to anything, so the rest can feel lucky. They laughed. Some of them clapped. I did not raise my voice. I walked to the head table, set our grandfather's watch face down by Grant's plate so he could read the 2 words scratched inside the case, and I told him to enjoy sitting at the head of that table while it was still his to sit at. Then I carried my own chair to the back of the room, set it down next to the catering staff, and I sent one line to the cottage next door, to Harold Alden, the retired judge who had not driven anywhere in years except to bury my grandfather. 3 weeks before he died, the old man I took to chemo every Tuesday had sealed a letter with that judge and asked him to read it out loud on the day this family decided I was nobody. Grant had just decided it, with a microphone, to applause. I texted the judge 1 word. Then I loosened my tie and waited for the doors to open. The villa had been my grandfather's house, and Claire had wanted her wedding in it more than she had wanted anything. She wanted the whole family under Walter Vance's roof on the best day of her life, in the long room off the garden where the old man used to keep his books. And she got her wish. That is how 150 people came to be sitting under the same beams when my brother decided the time had come to make an example of me. I had been seated at the head table. That part matters, because Grant made a show of it, as if my chair had been an error the room was too polite to mention. It was no error. My sister put me there. Claire, 30 years old, in a dress our mother had picked a fight over, had walked the seating chart herself and set me at the head table between an empty place and a cousin. And she had looked pleased about it. And I had let myself be pleased, too. That was the mistake. Not the chair. Letting myself forget, for one evening, what this family did with a man who set his guard down. The dinner had gone the way these things go. Marcus, my new brother-in-law, was a quiet man who said almost nothing and looked at my sister like he could not believe his luck. My father worked the tables. My mother held court. And Grant, 4 years older than me, the golden son, the one who got introduced to strangers with a resume instead of a name. Grant waited until the plates were cleared and the room was warm with wine before he stood, picked up the microphone, and tapped a fork against his glass. The room went quiet and turned to him. A room always turns to Grant.
"Before we get to the dancing," he said, "I want to say something about family, because that's what tonight is, right? Family. Every last one of us under the roof our grandfather built the way it should be."
People smiled. My mother put a hand to her chest. Grant is good at this. He has always been good at making a room feel chosen, right up to the moment he tells them who is about to pay for the privilege.
"Now I've got a business associate here tonight," he went on. "A man who has done more for this family in 1/4 than some people have managed in 40 years. He turned. He put his hand on the back of my chair, and he's standing at the bar while my little brother takes up a seat at the head table. That doesn't sit right with me. Elliot, be a good sport for once. Give your seat to someone who actually matters tonight."
A sentence like that only works if the room is ready to laugh. Grant had spent months getting them ready, in phone calls and lunches and small remarks left in the right ears, and so the room laughed on cue. I stood. There was no version of the evening where I let my sister watch me wrestle my brother for a chair on her wedding day, so I stood, and a florid man in a 2-new suit came around the table, would not meet my eyes, and stood at my place, waiting for me to clear out of it like I was a coat someone had left on the good chair.
"There you go," Grant told him. "Warm now, a host again. Sit. You've earned that seat more than anyone else at this table."
Grant was not finished. He lifted his glass.
"You know every family has one," he said, warm and easy, playing to the tables at the back. "One son who just never quite gets there. You all know the type. Always between things, always about to turn some corner. He's going to sort it all out this year, and then it's next year, and then you stop asking because you love him and you don't want to make him feel worse about it than he already does." He smiled. "I've spent a lot of years frustrated with that. So tonight I'm going to try something new. Tonight I want to say thank you." He raised the glass higher. Because I finally worked it out. Every family needs one son who never amounts to anything, so the rest of us can feel lucky. So here's to my brother, the reason the rest of us look as good as we do.
He let the room have it, then lifted a hand like a man quieting a crowd he adored.
Elliot, I mean that with love. Somebody in every family has to be the cautionary tale. Might as well be the one decent enough to take it well.
They laughed. Some of them clapped. My mother laughed with her whole face. My father pushed halfway out of his chair, glass up.
"Hear, hear," Warren said, to Grant, "and to knowing the difference between a good investment and a bad one, which is a thing this family has never had any trouble telling apart."
Half the room lifted their glasses with him. And Aunt Marlene, 60 years old and sharp as a hook, leaned toward the woman beside her without troubling to lower her voice.
"What hope do you have against me?" "Well, at least he shows up," she said. "That's about the whole of what you've ever gotten out of Elliot. But you have to give the boy that much." She raised her own glass an inch toward the back of the room, toward me, as though she thought she was being generous. "Every time, whether a single soul in the room wants him there or not."
The table around her laughed at that, too, because they all heard the joke folded inside it, that showing up was the whole of what I had ever been good for, and that even the showing up was a thing to be tolerated rather than thanked. I know how this is supposed to go. The man at the center of the joke is supposed to feel something break. I didn't. That break had happened years ago in smaller rooms, over smaller cruelties, and I had run clean out of pieces for them to break a long time before my brother ever found a microphone. What I felt standing there while 150 people agreed in one breath about who I was quieter and much colder than a break. I felt the last thing I had been waiting on drop into place. My brother had just said it out loud, in front of witnesses, with a full glass in his hand, on the record. He had no idea he had just started something he could not stop. So I did not raise my voice. I set my own glass down, and I reached into my jacket, and I took out our grandfather's watch. It was an old thing, steel, the crystal scratched cloudy from years on a working man's wrist. Walter had worn it every single day I knew him. On the inside of the back case, scratched in by hand, small enough that you had to tilt it to the light to catch them, were 2 words. Grant did not know them. In 44 years, he had never once turned that watch over. That was my brother, in 2 words, he had never bothered to read. I walked to the head table. The stranger standing at my place found something worth studying in the tablecloth. I set the watch down face down beside Grant's plate, the back of the case looking up at him, so that if the man ever grew curious enough to turn it over, he could read what our grandfather had left there for himself. Then I leaned in, close enough that no microphone needed to hear it, and I said the only thing I said to my brother all night. "Enjoy sitting at the head of that table," I told him, "while it's still yours to sit at." Grant smiled at me. He did not understand the sentence, and there is nothing a man like Grant hates more than a sentence he cannot understand, so he smiled to paper over it and turned it back out to the room.
"Would you look at that," he said, to a fresh ripple of laughter. 40 years old, and he's finally landed a comeback. That's progress right there.
Then he waited for me to slink off toward the bar the way the whole room expected. I did not go to the bar. I went back to where I had been sitting, and I picked up my own chair. I did not let a waiter take it. I did not leave it for the stranger to fold himself into. I picked it up with both hands, and I carried it the full length of that room, past every table of people who had just laughed.
"Attaboy, Elliot," Grant called after me, and the room gave him one more laugh, carrying his own weight for once.
I did not answer him. I set the chair down at the very back, next to the catering staff, beside a rolling cart stacked with dirty plates, and I sat in it, facing the head table, facing all of them. Behind me, a waiter had to be sent to find another chair for the important man, because I had taken mine with me. At the head table, my mother caught a neighbor of hers glancing back toward me with something close to discomfort, and she headed it off the way she headed off everything that threatened to spoil an evening.
"Oh, don't waste that on him," Diane said. "Elliot is always fine. Doesn't take things the way you or I would. He never has. It's a mercy, honestly, when you think about it."
If Grant wanted me at the back of the room, I would sit at the back of the room. I would just get there on my own 2 feet, carrying my own chair so that not one person in that hall could tell themselves later that I had been dragged. There is a difference between a man who is put in the back and a man who walks himself there, and it is the only part of a night like that a room actually remembers. The head caterer, a woman old enough to know exactly what she had just watched happen, shifted a tray to make room for me and did not say a word about it, which I have not forgotten. I sat among the plates with my back straight, and I took out my phone. Next door to the villa, close enough that you could see his porch light through the gap in the garden hedge, was a cottage. In it lived Harold Alden, 71 years old, a retired judge who had not driven his car anywhere in the last 2 years except once, 2 weeks before this wedding, when he pulled it out of the garage to follow a hearse to a cemetery and bury the only neighbor he had ever called a friend. 3 weeks before my grandfather died, in the front room of that cottage, the old man I had driven to chemo every Tuesday for 2 years had sat down with Harold Alden and sealed a letter. He handed the judge one instruction to keep with it. Keep it sealed. Do not mail it, do not hand it over, do not soften it. Read it out loud, in front of whoever is in the room, on the day this family finally decides, in the open, that Elliot is nobody. For 2 years, my grandfather had believed that day was coming. I had told him he was wrong about his own blood. He had only looked at me the way he did when he knew a thing I did not, and let it go. Grant had just proved him right, with a microphone, to applause. I opened the message to Harold Alden. There was no paragraph to write. The old man had told the judge precisely what to wait for, and the judge had been waiting, and the condition had just been met in front of 150 witnesses. I typed one word. I read it once. I sent it. Then I put the phone away, and I loosened my tie, and I looked at the double doors at the back of the hall, the ones that opened onto the garden and the hedge and the cottage beyond it. And I waited for them to open. 150 people in that room believed they had just watched me lose everything I had. My mother was still laughing. Grant had already turned back to his business associate and was saying something that finally coaxed a smile out of the man in the borrowed chair. Not one of them, not my brother behind his microphone, not the stranger in my place, not the aunt who laughed the loudest, knew that the only thing in that hall that mattered was already getting to its feet in a cottage next door, because a man they had all agreed was nobody had just sent one word through a garden hedge. 2 years before that night, none of it would have been possible. 2 years before, on a Tuesday morning, my grandfather was still alive, and I was sitting in a hospital parking lot with the engine running and a paper cup of gas station coffee going cold in the holder, and not one person in my family had the first idea where I disappeared to every week. The Tuesdays started with a phone call nobody else in the family wanted to take. Walter had been handed a hospital schedule every week for as long as the treatments ran, and somebody had to get him there, because at 84 he was too proud for a cab and too stubborn to tell his own son he needed a hand. Warren was busy. Grant was building something. My mother had a standing thing on Tuesdays she never named out loud. So the call came down the line the way it always did in that family, past everyone who mattered, until it reached me at the bottom. I said yes. I fixed appliances for a living, and my Tuesdays were mine to give. So I gave them. 7 in the morning every week I collected Walter off his front step and drove him across town and sat in a hard chair while the bag ran, and then I drove him home and put the kettle on and left before he could work up to thanking me, because being thanked embarrassed us both. I knew the route by heart inside a month, and I knew him better for the driving of it. He talked more in that car than he ever did at a dinner table. Maybe 6 months in, he watched the road a while and then set it flat.
You're the only one who ever comes. You know that?
Somebody has to make sure you don't charm the nurses into keeping you longer than you're worth.
The others are busy.
They're very busy.
You're busy too. You just come anyway. He let that sit against the windshield a moment. Remember, I noticed. One day this family is going to have a great many opinions about who you are. And I want you to remember your grandfather knew who actually showed up.
You're getting sentimental, Walter. It's the drugs.
It's not the drugs. Watch the road.
A few weeks on, stopped at the light that always caught us, he asked me a thing he'd plainly been holding a while.
Does your mother know it's me you spend your Tuesdays with?
She knows I'm somewhere. She's never once asked where.
And you'll not tell her?
If I told her, it'd turn into a thing I did to be thanked for. This way it stays a Tuesday.
He worked that over the length of the block. Your brother never once did a thing that couldn't be counted out loud. I used to take that for ambition.
It got him an office and a partner. Ambition's done all right by Grant.
So it has. Light's green. You're slow off a light, you know that? Always have been.
I get where I'm going.
That you do. Not one of them has ever once clocked it, but you do.
Another Tuesday, near the end of that first year, he caught me checking the clock in the waiting room.
You've got somewhere better to be. Go on, I can sit in a chair by myself.
You can, you won't. I'll be right here.
Every week you say that.
Every week you try to send me home so you can tell the nurses nobody came for you. I've got your number, old man.
Bah, get me a coffee then if you're staying, the bad kind from the machine. Your grandmother never once let me have the bad kind.
I got him the bad coffee. He held it in both hands for the warmth and watched the line run into his arm.
When I'm gone, you'll take a week back for your own self once, just to see how it sits on you.
I'll think about it.
You won't. You'll have it filled with somebody else's errand inside a month, and none of them will thank you for that one either.
You've a strange way of saying thank you, Walter.
I'm not. I don't thank a man for a thing he'd have done unthanked. Drink your coffee. You look worse than I do this morning.
2 years of it. Walter noticed. He was the only one who ever did, and he was dying, and those two facts had a way of riding home in the car together. Grant was 4 years older than me and had spent those 4 years becoming the answer to every question my parents asked about their children. The business, the office, the partner, the letterhead. My father couldn't hand a stranger without folding the size of it into the handshake. When the hospital schedule first landed, I'd called him to ask if he wanted to split the weeks. He laughed, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. I'm not asking you to take all of it. Split it with me. 2 weeks on, 2 off. He's your grandfather, the same as mine.
He's everybody's, Elliot. That was never the question. A pause and the sound of him covering the phone to answer someone in the office before he came back to me. You've got the flexibility, though. That's the difference between us. I've got people whose paychecks depend on me being in that office. You can move a job around. It's not the same thing, and you know it isn't.
Sure, I said. I'll take him.
See? Easy, you're a good sport, Elliot. Somebody in this family has to be.
And I did. For 2 years. And in 2 years, Grant asked me exactly twice how the old man was holding up, both times at parties, both times over my shoulder while he scanned the room for someone better to be talking to. Once in the car, Walter told me what he thought was coming.
You watch what happens the day I'm gone. Your brother runs this family. He's got all of them. Your father, your mother, the aunts. Sure, he's the future, and you're the one they carry.
Grant has run this family since I was 10.
Then you know how he does it. He won't fight you, Elliot. He'll tell them, gentle as anything, that you drift, that you're not to be counted on. And they'll nod along, because it is less trouble than remembering who drove me to my treatments.
You've a low opinion of your own family this morning.
I've a clear one. I raised the half of them. I know what they reach for when the reaching's easy. You they never once had to account for, so you're the one they'll spend when it costs them nothing. He shifted against the belt. I don't say it to sour you. I say it so the day they do it, you're the only one in the room who isn't surprised.
Let him try telling them I drift, I said. I'll be standing in the room when he does.
That's what I'm counting on. Not the winning, the being there. You be in the room when it happens, whatever they decide to make of you. Promise me that.
I promise. The clearest picture I have of what I was to them is a Christmas, right in the middle of all those Tuesdays. I came in late because I had driven Walter home from a run that left him gray and shaking and had stayed until he was warm and dozing, and I walked into my parents' house still wearing the coat I'd had on in the infusion room. Walter had wanted to see the tree, so he was out in my car in the driveway, asleep in the passenger seat with the heater running, too spent by the drive to make the front steps. I opened the door only to say I was there. My mother was mid-story with a cousin, glass in hand, and she did not stop for me. She lifted the glass an inch and finished her sentence.
Oh, there he is. You know Elliot has finally found a use for himself, driving the old man around so he'll be remembered at the end. Smartest thing the boy has ever done, honestly. Get yourself in the will while there's still a will to get into.
The table laughed. It was a good line, and she knew it, and a cousin I had not seen in a year laughed the hardest and raised a glass toward me as though I were in on the joke. Grant did not even look up from his drink.
Leave him be, Mom. It's the closest thing to a job he's held in years. Somebody has to chauffeur the old man, and God knows Elliot's the one with the open calendar.
"Merry Christmas to you too, Grant," I said, and I went back out to the car, because Walter was asleep in it 20 feet away with the heater running, and he never heard any of it. I have always been glad he never heard it. I have never once managed to unhear the rest of them enjoying it while he slept. The last Tuesday came about 4 weeks before the wedding. I did not know it was the last one. You never do. The treatments had quit working, and everyone at the hospital had gone gentle in the way that tells you more than a chart ever will, and I drove him home the same as any other week. But in the driveway, engine off, the cold coming up through the floor of the car, he did not reach for the door. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the house he had lived in for 50 years. Then he worked the watch off his wrist.
Take this.
"You are not giving me your watch, Walter."
I'm not asking. Don't argue with a dying man about a watch. You'll lose and you'll feel low about it after. Turn it over. Go on.
I turned it over. On the inside of the back case, scratched in by hand, small enough that I had to tilt it into the window light, were 2 words: "Every Tuesday." He had put them there himself, somewhere across those 2 years, in the crooked letters of a man who never in his life had good handwriting.
So nobody ever gets to tell you it was nothing. You showed up, every single one of them. I marked it down where they cannot argue with it.
You're talking like a man with a month left.
I'm a man with about that. He said it the way he'd have told me it might framed. There is going to be a day I have the breath decides, out loud in front of people, that you are nobody. Don't shake your head. I know them. I made half of them. When that day comes, you go to Harold, next door. He is holding something of mine sealed up, and he knows to wait on your word and nobody else's. The day they decide you are nobody, Harold reads what I left, not a minute before.
"No such day is coming," I said.
It is coming.
"It isn't." He only looked at me the way he did when he knew a thing I did not, and he folded my fingers shut over the watch, and he let it go. Then he let me help him up his own steps, and neither of us knew to call it the last time. He was gone 2 weeks later. 2 weeks after that, my sister was married in his house, because Claire had wanted the whole family under Walter's roof more than she had wanted anything else in the world, and no one alive had the heart to tell a bride otherwise. Harold Alden drove himself to the funeral, the only trip his car had made in 2 years, and stood at the back in a black coat. Grant gave the eulogy. 11 minutes of it, most of it about the business Walter had lived to watch him build, and he never once named who had sat with the old man on Tuesday mornings, because as far as that church knew, no one had. Afterward, Alden found me among the parked cars and put a dry, cool hand around mine and held it a beat longer than a handshake asks for.
"When you are ready, you know where I live, right next door. I am not going anywhere, and neither is what he left with me."
Then he drove home to the cottage on the far side of the garden hedge and waited, the way my grandfather had asked him to wait. The morning of the wedding, I dressed alone, with nobody to perform it for. I own one suit, funerals, weddings, nothing between, and I put it on, and then I opened the top drawer of the dresser, where I keep the short list of things I'd carry out of a burning house. 2 of them mattered that morning. The first was Walter's watch. I set it on the dresser by my keys so I'd sweep up both on my way out, because I was not going to be the man who left that watch at home the one night it needed to be in the room. The second was a folded document, a copy of something Walter had put in my hands a year before he died, telling me to keep it safe and say nothing of it to a living soul. I had done exactly that. It had lain in the drawer, folded in thirds and going soft at the creases for a year, and it looked like nothing. A plain page, no seal, no ribbon. I checked it was what it had always been, folded it back along the worn lines, and slid it into the inside pocket of the jacket, flat against my chest. Then I dropped the watch into the pocket opposite, where its weight would ride against my ribs all night, and buttoned the jacket over both. I was not going to give them the meltdown they'd already written for me. I could hear the stage going up all week, in the careful way my mother kept asking whether I was really sure I wanted to come. In the mirror, I looked like just what they expected to watch walk in, a man in his one good suit with nothing up his sleeve and nothing in his hands, which was the idea. Everyone at that wedding thought they knew what I was carrying. None of them did. The afternoon before the wedding, we ran the rehearsal in the villa, and Grant ran the rehearsal. He carried a clipboard he never once wrote on and a voice pitched to reach the back wall, and he walked the length of Walter's old library, the shelves hauled out, the folding chairs not yet placed, the tall windows full of the garden, like a man who already owned the floor under his feet. My father followed him a step behind, agreeing with things before they were finished being said. That had been the shape of the family since I was 10. Grant decided. Warren seconded. The rest of us found out where we were meant to stand. He'd been dead 13 days, not 2 weeks gone, and the house had already stopped being Walter's in the way everyone in it talked. His name was still on the mailbox, and his books were still in cartons in the garage, and my brother moved through the rooms the way you move through a thing you've already priced. Claire had wanted her wedding here more than anything on earth, and no one had the heart to tell a bride her grandfather wouldn't be at the table. So we were all inside the old man's walls, and the house belonged, for the afternoon, to whoever spoke loudest in it. I had come to carry chairs. That is the plain truth of why I was in the room at all. Claire had asked me the week before if I'd help set the space, quietly, the way she asked me things, so no one could make it into anything. And I'd said yes, the way I always said yes to that family. And so I was in my shirt sleeves working folding chairs off a rolling cart when my brother put me to work in front of the aunts.
Elliot, not the front, those go at the back. He pitched it loud, the way a man corrects hired help when he wants the room to watch him do it. And tomorrow, during the ceremony, you're in the back row. You've always had a gift for embarrassing this family the second there's a light on you. So let's not make it weird on Claire's day. Back of the room. You'll be more comfortable back there anyway.
A cousin I hadn't seen since the funeral laughed. Over by the window, Marlene made the small approving sound she kept in reserve for anything Grant did, and then, because a joke unfinished bothered her, she finished it.
Oh, let him work, Grant. He likes a task. It was always the sitting still he was no good at, our Elliot. Give the boy something to lift and he's no trouble to a soul.
My father didn't laugh, but he nodded, which from Warren was the same as laughing, and he said the thing he always said, the thing that could never be quoted back to him afterward.
Let's just keep it simple this weekend, Warren said to the room, to no one. Simple is all anybody's asking for.
I set the chair down exactly where Grant pointed, and I did not give him the flinch he'd built the whole moment to collect. He'd been collecting it off me since I was a boy, and I'd quit paying it out somewhere back in a lot of smaller rooms than this one. So I straightened up and looked at him easy. Back row's fine, I said. Somebody ought to be able to see the whole room anyway.
That's the spirit. He wasn't really listening. Just keep out of the photographs and we'll all have a lovely day.
He'd already half turned away. He hadn't come early for the rehearsal, and he certainly hadn't come for me. He'd come for the man he'd been steering around the house for the last 20 minutes. 50s, a good coat, a stillness to him that doesn't come from being family. Grant kept one hand at the man's back the entire time, the way you walk a buyer through a property you're proud of. He introduced him to the aunts as a partner, Dale Rourke. An investor in the business, Grant said, practically family now, and Dale shook the hands he was offered and spent his attention on the house instead of the people in it, the molding, the fireplace, the garden through the glass. He looked at rooms the way some men look at numbers. I already knew what Dale Rourke was to my brother, and I hadn't learned it from my brother. In the days after the funeral, I'd gone by my parents' house to drop off a key, and Grant had been out on the back porch on the phone, and the kitchen door had been standing open, and he hadn't known I was inside. He was reassuring somebody. The estate would clear by spring, he was saying. The house on its own covered the whole exposure twice over. There was nothing in the world to worry about, because it was as good as his already, only the paperwork left to catch up. Then he said a number. He said it the flat, easy way a man says a number he has already spent. When he came back in and found me at the counter, he asked how long I'd been there, and I told him I'd only just walked in, and he chose to believe it, because believing it was less work than the alternative. The man on the far end of that call was standing in Walter's library now, running his eye along the crown molding like he was pricing it by the foot. I want to be honest about what I knew that afternoon. I didn't have the shape of the whole thing, not the half of it. What I had was a brother who'd spent money he didn't have against a house that wasn't yet in his hands, a lender walking the collateral to reassure himself, and a grandfather 13 days in the ground who'd spent his last good months warning me a day was coming that I kept swearing wasn't. Standing there with a chair in each hand, I quit swearing it wasn't. So I understood the rehearsal better than Grant imagined. He owed this man real money, the kind you raise against something big and slow to sell, and he'd promised him this house would cover it. For a promise like that to keep standing, my brother needed one thing from me. He needed me to stay the family joke, the brother nobody counted, nobody consulted, the one you'd never put in a room where the numbers were real. As long as I was nothing, no one would look too closely at anything behind me. Grant's whole footing rested on me being small, which was the first time in 40 years that being small looked like something I could use. So I gave it to him. I gave it to him better than he'd ever once managed to take it. As they passed the cart, I caught the tail of what Grant was selling.
And this whole back wall opens up when the weather turns, he was telling Dale, low, warm. You take that out, the garden becomes the return on the thing. I told you it was underpriced against the note. I told you.
You've told me a lot of things, Grant.
And every one of them's held, hasn't it?
The papers you showed me, those were real.
Real as this floor. You worry more than my own accountant, Dale. By summer, this is the best money you ever put anywhere, and you'll be embarrassed you asked. You know what the old man never did? Grant went on, lower as they moved off. He never once thought bigger than the four walls he sat in. Had all this and did nothing with it his whole life. That ends with me.
Long as it ends with my money back, Dale said. I don't much care whose name it ends under.
A little later, he walked Dale the full length of the room, straight to the cart where I was breaking down the last stack, because a man showing off a house enjoys showing off how cheaply the help comes with it.
This is my brother, Elliot, Grant said. He's between things right now. Aren't you, Elliot? Good with his hands, though. I'll give him that. Handy to have around a weekend like this one. He turned back to Dale with the warmth he saved for people who counted. Dale's been asking about the estate. The house, all of it, wants probate wraps. I keep telling him it's a formality at this point.
Formalities have a way of running long, Dale said. That's the only thing I ever worry about, the running long.
Not this one. Weeks, not months. Grant caught Warren's eye across the room. Dad, the estate, tell him. Weeks, right?
It's all in hand, Warren said, not coming any nearer. Grant's got it in hand. Grant's got all of it in hand.
Dale looked at me then. The careful way a cautious man looks at anyone standing too near a conversation about money. He was running his own quiet arithmetic, weighing whether the brother with the folding chairs was a complication no one had mentioned to him. So I gave him the face my brother needed him to see. I looked at the two of them like men talking a language I'd never been taught. "Oh, don't ask me about any of that," I said, and I wiped my hands down the rag and let a little laugh into it. "Wills, estates, probate, whatever the right word is, I wouldn't know where to start with the paperwork. That's Grant's whole world, always has been. Point me at the caterers and I'm worth something. Sit me down in front of a document and I'm furniture." I picked up 2 chairs, one in each hand, and lifted them like that was the only weight I understood. "Where do you want the rest of these, Grant?"
Corners. Anywhere, you'll figure it out.
You don't mind it, though? Dale asked me, and there was more freight behind the question than the words carried. Your brother taking on the house, the estate, all of it. Family gets strange about that kind of thing. I've watched it get strange.
It was the shrewdest thing anyone said to me all week, and he had no idea he'd said it. He was feeling for the exact crack Grant had sworn to him wasn't there. A second son, a sore one, the kind who surfaces 18 months on with a lawyer and a grievance. I handed him the opposite of what he was reaching for. Grant's the one who built something, I said. He was ready for it. Me, I'd have made a mess of a house like this inside a year. You'd not want me anywhere near it. It's where it ought to be. I shrugged and reached for another chair. The business, the house, all of it. That was always going to be Grant's. I never wanted the headache of it. I just want tomorrow to go clean for my sister. That's the whole of what I'm here for.
See, that's my brother. Grant said it almost fondly to Dale over my head. No ambition in the man. Never had a scrap of it. Honestly, it's the best thing about him.
I felt Grant relax beside me. I'd said the magic words. Not the ones about caterers. The ones about him. Praise. He could never get his fill of it, and he never quite trusted a room that withheld it. And here was his failure of a brother laying it at his feet unprompted, in front of the one man he most needed to impress. It loosened the last knot of caution in him, and he did the exact thing I'd stood there hoping he would do. He reached for more than he had.
See? Grant said, and he clapped a hand down on my shoulder, pleased with me for the first time in years. This is what I keep trying to tell you, Dale. He doesn't even care. There's no one else with a claim on any of it. No one who'd even understand what a claim was. The place is basically signed. It's mine and everything but the last stamp on the last page. You could break ground the day after the probate clears, and not a soul would raise a hand.
You told me it was already yours, Dale said. Not sharp. Stantonitz keeping his own books straight. When I wired the money, you said signed, done, basically yours already.
And it is. Grant said it too quick off the mark, a half-beat faster than a settled thing needs answering. It's a technicality, Dale. The old man's gone. The house comes to me. The lawyers just have to walk the paper through. You've seen the paper. You think I'd have you standing out here if there were a question anywhere and at you? Whose wedding is in this house tomorrow? Whose family? It is handled.
I'm sure it is, Dale said, and he didn't sound sure at all.
Dale looked around the room the way he'd been told to. He looked at the good molding and the long garden and my sister's flowers waiting in their buckets by the door. And for all of it, some of the worry came back up into his face anyway. The look of a man who'd heard his partner answer a beat too fast. He didn't say anything more, but he'd already said the one line that mattered out loud, 3 feet from me, that when he handed my brother his money, my brother had told him the house was already his. I put that away where I put everything that year, quietly, whole, word for word. Grant got an arm around Dale's shoulders and walked him back toward the garden doors, talking the whole way, the doubt smoothed flat again by the momentum of a man who'd never once been made to pay for being wrong. He'd gotten what he wanted out of me, and I'd handed it to him gift-wrapped. It had never cost me so little to be small as it did that afternoon. Standing in a house full of chairs I'd carried in myself, listening to him promise a stranger a thing that was not, whatever the last stamp said, half as simply his as he swore. I carried the final 2 chairs to the back of the room and set them in the row he'd chosen for me, and standing there I found he'd been right about one thing after all. The back was the best seat in the house. He needed me to be nothing, so I let him keep believing it. And from the back of a room, hands full and mouth shut, you can watch a man like my brother do the one thing you need him to do. Keep walking himself out over open air, and never once look down. The rehearsal dinner was in a private room at the back of a restaurant Grant had chosen and Grant was paying for, which meant Grant spent the first hour of it walking the long table telling everyone how good the wine was and letting them thank him for it. My father trailed a step behind him the way he always did, nodding at compliments that weren't aimed at him. My mother held the far end of the room with a glass in her hand and a story going, and I had been put at a small square table off to the side. 2 chairs, a votive candle, a clean view of everyone else's backs. Claire's table was the long one, the lit one, the one the whole evening bent toward. Mine was the table you give the relative you have to invite and would rather not seat next to anyone who matters. I clocked the arrangement the second I came through the door, and so did Grant because he'd built it.
"There's Elliot. Put him at the little one by the wall," my brother called out, warm to the room at large, as if he were doing me a favor. "Never has been much for a crowd, our Elliot. Give the man some elbow room. You'll be happier back there anyway, away from all the fuss, won't you? He always is."
A cousin smiled into her napkin. I pulled out the chair and sat down without a word, and I let them all watch me settle into the seat he'd chosen, because a man who takes the small table quietly gives the room nothing to chew on. That was the whole of my strategy, walking in. Take the seat, give them nothing, let the evening run itself out. I'd worked that same plan in 100 smaller rooms, and it had never once failed me, which is a different thing from saying it had ever worked. It was Marlene who came to collect me, near the end of the second course. She slid into the empty chair across the votive with a full glass, and the particular expression she wore for being kind to me where people could see her do it. She had been my grandfather's daughter and my father's younger sister for 60 years, and in all of them, I had never once watched her do a hard thing that cost her anything. She did the easy cruelty. She did it gently, with her hand over yours.
"What hope do you have against me? I want you to hear me out before you get your back up," she said, turning the glass a quarter turn on the cloth. "Because somebody in this family loves you enough to say the hard thing to your face, and it won't be your brother, and it won't be your father, so it lands on me. Tomorrow is Claire's day, not yours. What hope do you have against me? And after everything family has put up with from you over the years, the very least you can do. The least is not make a scene on your sister's wedding day."
Everything this family had put up with. She said it the way you'd say it about a debt, as though the last 2 years of Tuesdays had been a favor the family did me and not the other way around. I didn't correct her. There was no version of correcting her that didn't become, in the retelling, the exact scene she was warning me against.
"Let's just keep it simple this weekend," my father said, arriving at her shoulder the way weather arrives, on schedule and without being sent for. "That's all anybody's asking, Elliot. One weekend, no drama. You can give your sister that much."
Nobody's saying don't come. My mother had come up on the other side now, so that I was sitting, and the three of them were standing, which is its own kind of sentence. She said it softly, which was how she delivered the sharp things. "We're only saying come, and be pleasant, and let the night be about Claire. Is that so much to ask after the year we've all had?"
"It isn't a punishment, son," my father added, in the reasonable voice he used for the least reasonable things. "It's a courtesy. Sit where you're put, smile for the photographs, keep your head down, and we'll all of us remember this as a lovely weekend. That's the whole ask."
"And don't go giving your sister that wounded look of yours across the room either," my mother said, still gentle. "She's got enough on her plate tomorrow without managing how you feel about the seating."
The year we've all had. As if it had been 1 year, shared out evenly among us. I kept my hands flat on the cloth, and I kept my face still, and I felt the old, familiar arithmetic run itself in the back of my head. 3 of them, 1 of me, a room full of witnesses primed to read any word I said back as proof. The math always came out the same. Say nothing. Outlast it. Let them dig. And then Claire was there. She'd come off the long table without anyone tracking her, the way a bride can move unseen through her own party for a minute, and she stood at the edge of my little table with her hand on the back of the second chair. She wasn't looking at Marlene, or at my mother, or at Warren. She was looking at me, and there was something forming in her face. A question, an apology getting itself ready, the first motion of her stepping across the line the 3 of them had drawn on the floor between me and the rest of the family.
"He hasn't done anything," Claire said low, "to none of them and all of them. He just walked in. He hasn't said a word to anybody. Why is everyone standing over him like—"
"What hope do you have against me?" "And there it is," Marlene said, turning smoothly off me and onto her, gathering Claire into it without a break in her voice. "You see, sweetheart, this is exactly the thing. It always become about him. He hasn't lifted a finger, and somehow the whole table's walking on eggshells around Elliot's feelings on your night. That's the gift he has. That's what I'm trying to spare you tomorrow."
It was a good move. I'll give her that. She'd taken Claire's defense of me and turned it in one sentence into fresh evidence against me, proof that I bent every room to myself just by being in it. And I felt the whole weight of the table swing back toward me, waiting. I'm not the one making a scene, Aunt Marlene. I said it level, no heat in it, the way I'd trained myself to say things in that family. Give them nothing to quote, no crack to widen, no edge to grab. And then I did the thing I have always done. I stood up. I picked up my glass to carry it somewhere with fewer of them in it, and I turned to go, and I told myself, the way I'd been telling myself for 40 years, that the turning was the strong move, that a man who won't be dragged into the fight can't lose it, that walking away with my head up was the last dignity they couldn't take off me. I was 2 steps gone before I felt it land wrong behind me. I looked back. Claire had come up off the chair. Whatever had been building in her face, the apology, the crossing over, the sister about to plant herself on my side of the line, had closed like a door. She had just watched me get told, in front of her, that I was the problem in the room, and she'd watched me answer it by picking up my drink and walking away from the table, and she read it the only way it could be read from where she stood. She read it as a man who wasn't denying the charge, a man who'd have stayed and fought if there'd been anything under it worth defending. Her hand came off the back of the chair. She took a step back toward the long table, toward the warm-lit middle of her own party, and Marlene was already lifting an arm to fold her back in, and I understood, a half-second too late, precisely what my walking away had just cost me. It had cost me her. The one person in that whole room still looking at me like I was her brother and not the family's standing joke, and I had handed her across the line by doing the thing I was proudest of, keeping my mouth shut, keeping my footing, keeping the peace. Marlene hadn't taken Claire from me. I'd set her down and walked off and left her on the floor to be picked up by whoever reached her first. Every quiet exit I had ever made looked different to me in that 1 second. All those rooms I'd left with my chin up, calling it strength. This was what the strength had actually been buying. This, right here, was the bill. So I did the thing I never do. I turned around and came back, not to Marlene. I was done spending anything on Marlene. I set my glass down on the little table, and I crossed the 3 steps to Claire and put myself between her and the long table. Close enough that for a moment it was only the 2 of us inside all that noise. And I did not defend myself. I said nothing about the seat or the scene or the standing over. I gave her the one thing that had only ever been ours. Claire, look at me a second. She looked. I kept my voice down under the room. You know I used to disappear on Tuesdays and nobody ever thought to ask where I went. I was with Walter the whole time, sitting with him while they ran the bag into his arm. And on one of the last of those afternoons, when he was too worn out to hold his own coffee, he got hold of my wrist. And for a breath, I wasn't in the restaurant at all. I was back in the hard vinyl chair with the machine ticking beside us, and my grandfather's hand was cold around my wrist, and his eyes were shut because he was saving what breath he had for the thing he'd decided to say to me.
Your sister's getting married in a few weeks, he said, plain, the way he said everything by then. I'm not going to be there for it. Don't argue. I've done the sums, and I'm not. But you are, so you'll do a thing for me, whatever this family has decided you are by the time that day comes, and they'll have decided something they always do. You make sure that girl gets her first dance. You get her out onto that floor. Even if I'm not there to see it, especially if I'm not there to see it.
I told Claire the short of it, standing there in the den. He made me promise you'd get your first dance, I said, even if he wasn't there to see it. I let that sit between us a beat. So here's what happens tomorrow. I'm not making a scene, and I'm not disappearing on you, whatever they decide to say about me between now and the toast. I made an old man a promise about your feet on that floor. I'm keeping it. That's the whole reason I'm in this room.
He said that? Her voice had gone small and steady at once, the way it does when a thing lands as true. About the dance, he actually said that.
He said that.
Then you're at my table tomorrow, Elliot. Not the back of anywhere, she said it fast, under her breath, before the line could be overheard and moved. I don't care one bit what Grant's arranged.
Leave the seating be, I said. Truly, it's not worth 1 minute of your night, and it doesn't cost me a thing to sit wherever he wants to put me. I meant that more than she could have known. Sitting where he wanted me was going to cost him a great deal more than it cost me. Just don't let go of my hand when the music starts. That's the only place I need you to hold a line tomorrow. The dance. You and me, on that floor, no matter what the room is doing. Can you do that one thing?
Okay, she said, and it came out steadier than anything else she'd said all night. The dance, you and me, I can do that one thing.
She didn't get to hold the ground. Marlene was already there, an arm sliding around Claire's shoulders and a bright hostess laugh laid down over the reach of it, turning her by degrees back toward the long table and the photographs and the version of the night that had a place set for everyone but me.
What hope do you have against me? Come on, sweetheart, they're wanting you up front for the toast. You can't be hiding back here in the corner.
And Claire went, because a bride goes where she's steered the night before her wedding. But she looked back at me once over Marlene's arm as she was drawn away, and the look she gave me was the one I had very nearly thrown in the trash 5 minutes earlier by walking off and calling it pride. I stood at my small square table with its 2 chairs and its 1 candle, and watched them fold my sister back into the middle of her own party. And I made myself count what had just happened without flattering any of it. I had almost let them take the last person in that house still looking at me like her brother. I had almost handed her over, gift-wrapped, by walking away from a table and telling myself the walk was strength. It wasn't. It never had been. That was the last time that weekend I would leave a room and let myself call the leaving anything but what it was. Whatever tomorrow turned out to be, I would be in it, standing where they could all see me. Which was, when I thought about it, exactly what I'd already promised a dying man I'd do. Twice now. Once about a dance, and once, a good deal earlier, about a day he swore was coming whether I chose to believe in it or not. By the time I came up the path to the villa, my brother had been working the rooms 3 hours. And in 3 hours, Grant could do to 150 strangers what he'd spent the week doing to the family. He'd told them who I was before I came through the door. You can feel that in a hall, faces turning off you before one of them has been introduced. Whatever Elliot Vance would be under that roof for the next 4 hours had been written by my brother and handed out with the champagne, and every guest had taken a glass. It was Walter's own house they were doing it in, his library cleared for the dancing, his garden lit gold through the tall glass, 2 weeks to the day since we'd buried him. Grant walked it like a man showing off a property come to him fair and square, and not one guest felt the strangeness of it. I felt little else. I found the seating first, the way I always do. My sister had put my name on the family table near the head of the hall herself, weeks back, in her own round hand, between the empty place she'd left and a cousin. Grant had worked at her all week to shift me off it. To a 2-top by the far wall for +1s, he'd said, for the dates of people I'd never meet. And for once she'd held, the first time in her life, Claire hadn't done as she was told. So the card was still there when I came in, and I took the chair she'd given me, because sitting where my sister put me was the one small line I could hold without making the scene I'd promised 2 people the night before I would not make. I already knew the seat would not last the night. A man like Grant does not settle a thing like that with a place card. By the tall windows, my aunt had a knot of the groom's relatives gathered close, warming them up the way you warm a crowd before the act comes on.
What hope do you have against me? Oh, you'll know Elliot the moment you see him. He'll be the one off in a corner looking hard done by, Marlene said, light as air, her hand on a woman's forearm. It's only his way. Every family's got the one who never quite got going, and ours has carried him a long while now, bless him. Be kind if he drifts near you, but don't feel you've got to draw him out. He'll thank you just for letting him sit. Easier all round.
3 tables over, my brother was doing the same work in a warmer coat.
Elliot, the one I mentioned. Grant said to a couple I had never laid eyes on, pitching it to carry a table past them. Good soul, wouldn't hurt a fly. Never could get the engine to turn over, though. He's between things. Has been a while, if I'm honest. Ran our grandfather to his appointments at the end, which was decent of him. Somebody had to. Just don't get him going on where he's sitting. He'll want you to know he minds. He doesn't. He prefers the back.
And my mother laid the last coat on it, moving between the two of them with a glass of her own.
He was very good to Walter at the end, very present, Diane said to the same couple, her face to them, and her voice angled back toward the wall where I stood. But here's the thing a mother sees that a stranger never could. He heard the word dying, and there he was in that car, every appointment regular as a clock. Devotion, some of them called it. He'll be present right up to the day the estate is settled, and not one of us will lay eyes on him until the next funeral. He's only ever around for what he can get, my youngest. It isn't cruel to say a true thing softly.
I heard all of it. I was meant to. There's a craft to saying the worst thing you own about a man in a voice tuned for him to catch while your face stays turned elsewhere, and my mother had 30 years in the trade. I stood at the wall with a drink I wasn't drinking and ran the count I always ran, 150 of them. One of me. Every last one handed the story at the door. So when Grant stood up an hour on, set his hand on the back of my chair, and told the room to give my seat to a man who actually mattered that night, there was nothing in it I hadn't watched coming all week. Nothing but the microphone. The week had passed the verdict in private, in the right ears. This handed it to 150 people and told them to laugh at it. He raised his glass and gave them his line about a family needing one son who never came to anything so the rest could count themselves lucky, and the room did the thing he'd built the evening to make it do. It laughed. Some of them clapped.
It's a lovely day, all of it. Let's just enjoy it and not go making anything of anything. That's the whole of what I ask, my father said to the table by his elbow, lifting his glass the careful inch that was not quite a toast and not one. Nobody wants a scene. We keep it light, and tomorrow it's a lovely memory for the girl.
My walk was already behind me. I had risen from my own place at the head of the room, stepped to where Grant sat, and left the one quiet line in his ear with the watch face down by his plate, both done while the room laughed. Then I went back for my chair and took it up by the back before the stranger could fold himself into it, and as I lifted it clear, my brother leaned in, the smile bolted on for the guests, and gave me one low thing meant for nobody but me.
Good man. Don't make it a whole production, Elliot, Grant said, barely over the noise. Not one soul out there will remember a word of whatever you think you've got behind your eyes. They'll remember you carried a chair. Go on and sit at the back and let your sister have her day.
So I carried it, past the tall white cake, past every turned face in that hall, and set it down at the very back of the room, beside the folding table where the catering crew stood the courses out. Then I took out my phone and sent the one line to the cottage next door, my thumb steady, while 150 people watched a nobody find his seat. There was nothing left to do at the front. I sat where I had put myself and let them have their look. It was the lowest I had ever stood in front of people, and the chair had nothing to do with it. The chair was mine. I'd carried it there myself. It was the 150. Every humiliation before this had been a family thing, 4 or 5 of them in a kitchen deciding what I came to. This was a hall of strangers handed the verdict at the door, everyone believing they watched a nobody find his level. The story had stopped being the family's now. It belonged to the room. Up at the head of the hall, my sister had gone very still. She set down her fork. I watched the same thing cross her face that had crossed it the night before at the rehearsal dinner, and this time she went with it. Claire pushed back her chair and started to stand, to come the whole length of the room and plant herself at the wall beside me, which would have undone my brother's evening in a single walk. She got halfway up, and my mother's hand closed around her wrist and drew her back down, the smile never once leaving Diane's face.
Sit down, Claire, my mother said, low, under the noise, her fingers gone white on my sister's arm and her chin still lifted to the guests, and walk to the back of your own wedding. 150 people are watching the bride tonight, and everyone will remember which way she went. Let him sit where he's put himself. It's all he's ever wanted, the whole of the attention on him. You will not hand it to him on your night.
He carried his own chair, Mother, Claire said, quiet, not pulling her arm loose, her eyes down the room on me. He hasn't said a word to anybody. He sat where every one of you put him. Nobody made him do a single thing tonight. We did. We sat at this table and let it happen, and called it keeping the peace, and I am done calling it that.
People are looking at you. Smile.
Take your hand off my arm, Claire said, and she said it smiling, because a bride at the head of the room has no other choice. The words coming out through the smile. I mean it. Take it off me.
When you've sat back, Diane said, not 1 second before.
And Claire sat back, because a bride cannot tear her arm from her mother's hand without becoming the scene they'd sworn all week he would cause. She stayed put, furious and helpless, and I understood they'd done to her in 90 seconds the thing they'd spent 2 years doing to me, stood her between the truth and the peace, and laid a hand on her wrist to help her choose. The night before, she'd promised me her hand when the music started, the one floor she would hold. Now I watched her weigh whether they'd even let her cross it. I could have sat there and worn it well. That was the whole design of the seat, a place at the back for a man to be seen taking it. But I'd promised myself I would not walk out of a room and call it strength. And the same coin had a second face. I would not sit in one and let being looked at be the only thing I did there. So I did the one thing left in that hall that was still mine. I turned the chair. It had been set to face the wall, framing me neat as a caption, the man sent to the back. And I turned it until I sat square to the head table, to my brother, my back to no one. Then I saw what was in front of me, the catering crew beside my chair, 4 of them, most of them kids on their feet since noon, with a sweating pitcher of ice water on their folding table, and not a minute anyone had spared them to drink a drop of it. "Pass me that," I said to the head caterer, level, nodding at the stack of clean glasses by his elbow. "They've been standing since noon, and not a soul in this room has once wondered whether you'd had a drink. Sit one of you down. There's a second pitcher under the table if this runs dry. I already looked. And if the front needs pouring, I'll get up and do it myself, and not one of them out there will dare tell me no." He gave the glasses over, not sure what I was about, and I filled them one at a time, steady, not a drop on the cloth, the way a man pours when his hand has no reason to shake. The first server took his as if he wasn't certain it was allowed. 2 tables up, an older woman off the groom's side, a guest, no stake in any Vance breathing, had been watching the back of the room the way a decent person watches a wrong that isn't theirs to right. She rose and came to my table with her empty glass, meaning to lay some kind word over me. I filled it before she could find the words. "Plenty of it back here, and nobody fighting you for a drop," I told her. "Stay as long as you like. The view's better from the cheap seats. You can see the whole room from the back, and the company asks nothing of you at all." She laughed, startled out of her pity into something warmer, and she stayed, and 2 tables' worth of heads turned to watch her do it. Up at the front, my brother saw it happen, and I watched him reach for the joke to cover it.
Would you look at that? The man's found himself a job for the night? Grant called down the hall, warm, going for the same easy laugh he'd had off them a minute before. Never happier than with a tray in his hands, our Elliot. He'll have watered the whole back wall before the cake is cut. Leave him to it, everybody. Leave the man be.
But the laugh didn't come the second time. It came thin, off his own end of the table and nowhere else, because the room had already turned from the sulking man he'd promised them and found a man at his ease instead, pouring for the staff and the strays as though the villa were his to pour in. 2 tables out of 150. It was nothing. But it was the first thing all night that hadn't belonged to Grant, and it landed where I'd set it. He put his glass down harder than a man does by accident, and the smile was gone off him. I set the pitcher back on its linen. I'll be plain, because it would be easy to make that pitcher into more than it was. It was not a victory. My chair sat among the catering carts at the back where I'd carried it. My sister was pinned to her chair by our mother's hand, and 150 people had raised a glass to my nothingness and meant it. But I'd walked in standing on something not one of them could see, and pouring water for a row of tired kids while my brother reddened at his own table was only the first edge of it I'd let show. They thought that was the floor. The floor was somewhere I had put it a year before, and only one man had the key. The one man in that hall who held anything I could use came in through the side door off the terrace at 8:45, and not one of the 150 knew what they were looking at. They saw a late neighbor in a gray suit 2 seasons behind the room. What came through that door was 71 years old, a retired judge who had not driven a car anywhere in years except once, 2 weeks back, to stand at the edge of my grandfather's grave. Harold Alden had walked the short way from the cottage on the far side of the wall with his hands in his coat pockets, the unhurried walk of a man who has already decided a thing and is only now getting up to do it. He stopped just inside the door and found me at the back wall without once sweeping the room, because he already knew which wall they'd have stood me against. My grandfather had trusted very few people in the hard last decade of his life, and the man crossing the floor toward me now was one of them, closer at the end than most of the blood relations laughing into their glasses around me. When Walter decided where to set down the one thing he would not say out loud, he did not carry it to a firm in the city with brass on the door. He carried it next door to Harold and told him to wait. I had taken that for an old man's sentiment once. I understood it now for what it had really been. The last clear-eyed thing Walter Vance ever decided, and not the softest. My brother saw him come in. I caught it from 60 feet. Grant's eye snagged on the gray suit and held it a half-second too long, and for the first time all night, something moved in his face that he had not put there himself. He had no idea what the old judge was to any of this. He only knew that the man from the cottage next door had no earthly reason to be at his wedding, and less reason to come in a side door and steer straight for the corner where the family had parked its failure for the evening. Grant turned back to his table and picked his smile up off the floor where it had slipped, but he had lost the run of whatever he was telling the couple beside him, and the man had to prompt him twice before he found it again. Alden reached me and did not put out his hand, because he had never been a handshaker, and because there was a sweating steel pitcher on the folding table between us, and nowhere clean to shake one anyway. He looked at the pitcher, and then at me, and then up the length of the room at the head table.
"Is there a room in this house with a door that shuts?" he said. It was less a question than an instruction with a lift at the end of it. "I spent 30 years refusing to say a thing where it could be half heard. I'm too far along to take up the habit at a wedding."
I knew the house. It had been Walter's for 50 years, and mine on paper for one, though only 2 people alive knew the second half of that sentence, and one of them had just walked in asking me for a door. I took him off the hall into the small room where Claire had stacked the gifts. A card table under silver-wrapped boxes, a black window onto the garden, a lamp somebody had left burning over it all. I shut the door on the noise, and it cut the band down to a pulse coming through the wall. For 2 weeks, the family had been a weather I lived inside of. This was the first door I had found to shut on it. Alden set his back to the black window and the dark garden behind it, and for a moment he looked exactly like what he was, an old man who had spent a career deciding which version of a story the record would keep, come out of a comfortable retirement next door to decide one more.
"You sent me a word an hour ago," he said, and laid a flat leather folder on the card table among the boxes. "I want to hear you say it with your mouth before I take my coat off. Walter's instruction to me was plain. Wait for the word, and be certain the word is yours. That nobody in this family put it in your hand, talked you into it, or talked you out of it. So look at me and tell me you're sure."
I'm sure. I did not dress it up. He watched my face the way I imagine he had watched a great many faces from a bench, for the flinch under the answer, and whatever he was hunting for, he did not find it. "He decided it an hour ago," I said, with a microphone, in front of every person my grandfather ever sat at a table with. He put his hand on the back of my chair and gave my seat to a man I had never met. "You can take the coat off, Harold. They decided tonight. It's the day he told you would come." He did not take the coat off. He took his hand off the folder instead, which for a man like him was the larger motion, and opened it a few inches, enough for me to see there was paper in it, not so much that the paper turned into something I would sit and read in a back room.
"3 things in here," he said, "and I've held all 3 since before he died. A deed, a trust, and the letter, the one he sealed with me by his own hand and told me to read out loud on the day this family called you nobody. I'll not crack that seal for an audience of one in a room full of wedding gifts. That was never the arrangement he built. Hear the shape of it, and then we put it away.
Tell me the shape.
The shape is that you have never once, in any of this, been asking this family for a share of anything. He said it slowly, setting each word down flat, the way you lay stones across a stream for somebody to cross on. Understand me, Walter did not leave you a slice of a thing your brother owns. In plain English, the house Grant has spent all week showing off was never his to inherit. It stopped being anyone's to inherit the moment your grandfather signed it over to you. You have spent this whole evening stood at the back wall of a room that is deeded to your name.
There it was, said out loud, in the one voice in the county that still carried weight when it spoke about who owned what. I had known it a year. I had kept my own copy of the deed in a drawer and carried it folded into the breast of this jacket. But knowing a thing alone in a drawer and hearing an old judge say it with his hand flat on the original are two different weights, and only the second one holds a man up. It did not make me glad so much as careful. My brother had climbed a long way out over a drop this week, hanging his whole weight on a floor that had never once been under his feet, and I did not expect him to come off it quietly. Alden turned the folder toward me and slid it 2 inches across the card table. The offer was plain in the motion. Take it, it is yours. Walk out there and end this in the next 10 minutes. I slid it back. Keep them, I said. All 3. I've got my own copy of the deed right here. I touched the breast of the jacket. And that's the only paper I'm carrying back out that door. If Grant gets it off me somehow, you've still got the recorded original, and the original is the one that counts. 2 of us, 2 papers, 2 rooms. That's a harder thing to make disappear than one man standing here holding all of it at once. He looked at me a moment the way you look at a man who has surprised you in a direction you happen to approve of. Then he drew the folder back to his own side of the table and rested his hand flat on top of it. And I understood we had agreed on a thing without either of us putting a name to it. He would not run this for me. He would carry the weight, I would pick the hour. That was the piece I had walked into the wedding still lacking. Not the paper. The paper had been folded in my pocket for a year. What I lacked was a second set of steady hands to hold their end while I chose the moment. Alone, I was a man at the back of a room with a folded page and a grievance. And a room like the one next door has a word ready for that man. With Harold Alden standing behind the same page, I was something they'd have to sit still for. That was the whole of what had changed, and it had just come in wearing a gray coat.
You could end it now, Alden said. Walk out there beside me. I'll have that room quiet before the band finds its next song. Why hand your brother 1 more hour on a table that's yours?
Because a paper read in a corner is a family squabble, I said, and the same paper read while he has the microphone in his fist is the truth. He can't sit still, Harold. You watched him lose his place just now. He'll stand up before the cake is cut and tell this whole room the place is his. When he does, I want the same 150 who clapped an hour ago to hear exactly who they were clapping for. Not in here with the gifts. Out there, where they laughed.
He told me you'd say that, and his thumb ran once along the seam of it, an old habit worn smooth. Near enough to the word. He said you'd not snatch at it, that you'd want it done in the open or not done at all. He was right about you a good deal more often than this family ever troubled to notice.
I let that sit a second among the boxes and the burning lamp, because it was the first true thing anyone had said about me under that roof in 2 weeks, and it had come by way of a man Walter trusted to hold his last words in a drawer next door. Then we're agreed, I said, when he calls it, not 1 minute before.
When he calls it, he buttoned the grey coat over the folder. I'll keep to the edges and let your brother talk himself out onto the limb. When it's time, find my eye. You won't need a second word. I'll be at the kitchen doors, and I don't miss much. He paused with his hand on the door. You understand there's no calling it back once I stand. Whatever he is to this family right now, he'll be something else by the time I sit down. That falls on him, but be clear-eyed before you send an old man out to do it.
I've been clear-eyed about it a year. Go and enjoy the wedding, have a drink. You walked all this way. Something almost moved at the corner of his mouth and thought better of it. He squared the folder against his ribs and went, and I gave him a minute to get out ahead of me so we would not come back into the hall together and hand Grant a picture he could ask questions about. Then I went in through the tables and came level with the head table, where my sister was still fixed in her chair by the hand our mother had closed on her wrist an hour before. Her eyes found me the length of the room and put a question to me I had no way to answer from there. I gave her nothing back, not because I had nothing, but because the one thing I had was worth more unspent, and she would have it soon enough out here with the rest of them. I carried my water to the back and sat down in my folding chair like a man who'd been walked outside for a talking to and come back the better for it, which was the picture the room wanted, and it suited me to let the room keep it. My brother caught my eye from the head of the room and lifted his glass a careful half-inch, a small private toast to the failure returned to his corner. I lifted my water back to him. He smiled. He thought he was smiling at a man who was finished. Nothing out there had moved. My chair still sat at the back where I'd carried it among the catering carts. The verdict still stood, drunk to and clapped for. But the arithmetic had quietly stopped coming out the way it always had. 3 of them and 1 of me my whole life. A whole haul of them and 1 of me an hour ago. Now it was 2 of us. He had the papers. I had the timing. And out past that door, still working the room, still lifting his glass, Grant thought he had the room. My brother had the head of the room, and I had a folding chair by the catering station, and for the length of one more song that suited me exactly, because the thing I still needed was not out there under the lights with him. It stood 40 feet the other way, buttoned inside a gray coat against the kitchen doors, where a man of 71 held a folder flat to his ribs and read the party the way you read weather whose shape you already know. I had told Harold Alden I would pick the hour. What I had never once done, in a whole year of being certain the house was mine, was hold the one version of the paper that would make a stranger certain of it, too. That was the gap, and I had been sitting on the wrong side of it all night calling myself armed. My own copy of the deed was folded in the breast of my jacket where it had ridden since I dressed, and a copy folded in a pocket is a private conviction, and nothing harder than that. Grant was working a far table, warming a couple who had never once heard my name said with any weight, and watching him do it I ran the plain arithmetic of the next hour. An old man does not stand up in front of 150 people on the strength of what I happened to believe. Belief was what I had walked in carrying. Before I gave him the nod, I wanted the stamped thing in my own 2 hands, read with my own eyes, so that when I moved on something a county clerk had already sworn to on an ordinary morning a long time back. So I got up. I did it the ordinary, unhurried way a man gets up who has been handed a job pouring water, filled a last glass off the sweating pitcher, set it in a waiting hand, drifted down the length of the catering table as if I were only checking whether the ice had held. The kitchen doors swung and settled on their hinges as a girl came through with a tray, and in the gap of them I came level with Harold and stopped, both of us facing out at the room, neither one of us looking at the other. From 10 feet we were a neighbor and a tired man sharing the wall the staff went in and out through, and nothing worth a second glance beyond that.
"You're meant to be sitting down looking finished," he said, low, his eyes on the dancing and not on me. "That was the whole of the picture an hour ago. A man who comes wandering back to the kitchen twice in one night hands a watchful brother something to add up."
Grant stopped adding me up the minute I carried my own chair. He has me filed. Open the coat, Harold. I want the one with the county's mark on it, not mine. He considered the room a second longer, decided the sight lines were his, and turned a quarter so the coat came off the light. He drew the folder out just far enough, thumbed past a page, and turned the top sheet toward me under the low bulb over the doors. It was not my copy. My copy was clean paper, a thing a man could have typed up in an afternoon and signed to himself in an empty room. This one wore a block of small county print stamped up in the corner, crooked, sitting a little proud of the line, the way a stamp goes down when a clerk is pressing 100 of them onto 100 pages before lunch. There were initials inked beside it in a hand that had never once thought about my family. That was the whole of the difference, and I felt it in my chest before I read a word. The difference between a paper you happen to own and a paper the county has written into a book downtown that it will go on keeping whether every Vance alive agrees with it or not.
This is the recorded original. The county keeps its twin in a book you can walk in off the street and pull down off a shelf, and that book is the thing that ends arguments. Not your pocket, not my word, that book. He laid his thumb flat under the crooked stamp. Read the date. Not Walter's signing line. He signed a great many things in his last years, and a signature only ever proves a man once held a pen. The recording. Read where they filed it in and made it true for everyone at once.
I read it. A morning, a full year before the one my sister would be married on tonight. A year. Near enough to the very month before Grant ever stood up in this house with a glass in his fist and called it the place he would be inheriting. I read it twice, because I wanted the shape of the numbers to stay in my eye after I looked away from them. The ink had dried a little cracked at the rim of the seal. Some clerk I would never meet had pressed it there on a plain morning while I was somewhere across the county, not yet knowing the old man had already done the thing. And it had been sitting in that book being quietly true for 12 months, while my whole family arranged itself around the opposite. A year before he ever called it his, I said.
A year and better. Recorded, filed, public. Anyone in the county with a free afternoon could have pulled it, and not one of your people ever thought to look under a man they had already decided was nothing. He let the coat swing shut over the page. From that morning the house had a living owner, and it was not your brother. Whatever he has raised money against this past year, he raised it against a title with a stranger's stamp on the top and your name on the bottom. He did not lose the house tonight, Elliot. He never had it to lose. He has spent a year selling a field he does not own the gate to.
Across the floor, at a round table 3 down from the head, my brother had his hand on the shoulder of a heavy, careful man in a good suit who had not laughed once all evening. Dale Rourke, the one guest in that hall Grant handled like a creditor instead of an audience, because that was exactly what he was. I had watched the two of them all through the rehearsal, Grant walking Dale through the villa room by room like a man showing a bank its collateral, dropping figures, promising the place was as good as signed over already. I had taken it then for the usual Grant, selling forward on a thing not yet in his hand, the way he had sold everything his whole life a season before he had it. I had the dates now. Every figure my brother had murmured into that careful man's ear had been murmured against a house that had already worn another owner's name for a full year. He had not been selling early. He had been selling a thing that was never coming. The man at his shoulder now, Rourke. That is the one he has been raising it off.
Then there is a fellow who believes he holds a lien on a house, and he holds nothing but air. Alden watched him the way he must once have watched a witness who did not yet know he had already contradicted himself. That man will do the sum himself before the night is out. And when he does, he will want a word with your brother that has nothing to do with a wedding.
I stood with all of it a moment while the band found the front edge of a new song, and I let myself do the one thing I had kept off the table all evening, which was change my mind about what I had been standing in. I had come to this wedding braced for cruelty, braced to be made small in front of strangers and to hand nobody the scene they had spent the week pricing in. Cruelty a man can stand inside of, it is only weather. But the crooked stamp under Harold's thumb turned the whole night a colder color than cruelty. A year ago, the old man had quietly made me whole, put the roof that was over every one of their heads tonight into my name, and told no one but the judge next door. Everything my brother had done since, every kindness-shaped blade slid in front of every stranger in this hall, had the same single job buried under it. Keep me so far beneath the notice of 150 people that not one of them ever idled over the question of whose name was on the door. He had not been fighting me for a larger piece of anything. There was no piece to fight over. The whole of it had come to me at once, a year before any of them lifted a glass. He had been standing on the one man already made whole and holding him under, so the water would never show what he had sunk down there.
Your brother was never short of a way out, Alden said, without heat, still watching Dale across the room. He had a clean road open the whole year. Leave you be, walk on past, keep his own trouble to himself. He wanted no money off you tonight. There was none to take. He wanted you gone. Be certain that is the man you're about to sit across from before I stand up.
And the letter, I said.
There is more in the letter. That part he reads, not us. Walter, I mean his own sentences, out loud the once, the way he sealed them with me, and I heard in the flatness of him that offering was not a thing on the table. It answers a question this deed never touches, and it is his to answer in his own words in front of the faces he named. You will have it when the room has it. Not 1 minute sooner, and not from me in a doorway.
I did not push him, and it was not patience that held my tongue. I wanted the seal broken once and in the open, in a voice the whole room would have to sit still under, and a letter cracked in a doorway for one man was a letter already half spent. So I let it stay shut against his ribs and asked him nothing. Whatever the old man had put in there past the house, he had put it there to be heard, and I was not going to be the one who heard it small an hour short of the mark. The danger had changed shape in the last 10 minutes, and I made myself name it plainly. An hour ago, the worst thing in the room was another cruel night in front of strangers. Now I was standing on a thing that could ruin my brother, and Grant would fight for his own skin harder than he had ever fought for anything the second he caught the smell of it. Then we hold it exactly like this, I said. You keep that one on you. I keep mine on me. 2 papers, 2 hands, and those doors at your back. Count it out, Harold. You are standing a dozen feet from the head table with nothing between you and it but a cake on a stand and an open aisle straight up the middle. That is the ground, and I do not want it a single inch different when it comes.
And how do I know the minute? You told me not before he calls it. He's a talker, your brother, but a room this warm could carry him past the cake and never once make him put the words in the open.
You will know because you will watch me leave this wall. He will lay his hand on the house before the night is done. He cannot help it. And a man like that has to show the one card he thinks he holds, while the room is still his. The second he says it out loud, I walk up the middle myself and set my copy flat by his plate in the same spot he set his own name an hour ago. Not handed to him. Set down where the whole table watches a piece of paper land. When you see it leave my hand, that is your minute. You come out of those doors and ask them for one of theirs.
By his plate. Something dry moved at the corner of his mouth and thought the better of itself. You've a taste for making a man read a thing where he is sitting. I keep to the edges, and I do not miss much. I told you that already. He squared the folder against his ribs where the coat covered it over whole. Go and sit back down in your corner and look finished for me a while yet.
I let that be the last of it and drew back off the wall the way I had come. In no hurry, a man who had wandered up to see the ice was holding and found it fine. My copy of the deed went flat against my chest again under the buttoned jacket, the only paper I meant to carry out into the light with my own hand. There was exactly one piece of the whole machine left that was not mine to set with my own hands. It was his to lift, and it ran entirely on Grant being the man he had been every day of my life. Now I just had to give Grant one more chance to say it out loud. I gave my brother the one thing he had wanted from me all evening, which was to come looking. I had barely drawn back from the wall by the kitchen doors and into the noise of the room before Grant was off the head table and cutting across the floor toward me. He had seen the watch lying face down by his plate where I'd left it. He had seen a gray suit 2 seasons behind the room walk in a side door and go straight to the wall they had stood me against, and stand there, like it belonged. A man who has spent a week building an evening toward one clean humiliation does not care for 2 things he can't account for arriving inside the same hour, and it was all over the smile he was carrying across the floor the way you carry a full glass you are afraid of tipping, too wide, too steady, watching itself.
There's my brother. He got a warm hand on my shoulder for the benefit of the near tables and turned me half around with it. Come back here a second, just us 2.
He steered me off the hall under a low arch into a dead-end alcove, a console table against the wall, a spray of white flowers going brown at the lip of the vase, a black window onto the dark garden. It was the sort of pocket a big room keeps for the things it doesn't want on display. Past the arch, I could see Dale Rourke down by the end of the bar, holding a drink he wasn't drinking, watching Grant's back the way a man watches weather he has money standing out in. Dale had been at my brother's elbow half the night, laughing on cue, refilling on cue. He wasn't laughing now. He had the look of a man who had started somewhere in the last half hour to quietly count. Grant drew a folded sheet from inside his jacket, smoothed it flat on the console with the edge of his hand, and laid a pen across it like a weight.
I've been thinking this has gone far enough. For both of us, the watch, whatever that little performance was, the old man from the cottage, it's ugly and it's Claire's night, and I will not have it turn uglier on her in front of these people. He turned the sheet so it faced me across the console. So we end it, right here, right now. A family peace agreement. Nothing a lawyer's fingerprints are on. I wrote it out myself 20 minutes ago. We both put our names down. We shake. Every word said, under this roof tonight stays under this roof. You stop being the injured party in the corner. I get my brother back. And tomorrow, not one of these 150 people remembers a thing except a good wedding.
It was a decent performance for a man improvising on a floor that had opened up under him a year ago without his ever once feeling it go. A day earlier, the word brother in his mouth might even have pulled at something low in me, the way an old habit pulls. But I had stood over a crooked county seal not an hour before and put my thumb on a date. I did not pick up his pen. I picked up his sheet instead, and I read it. Because I am a man who reads things before he signs them. And the first full line of it told me everything about the 20 honest minutes he claimed to have spent writing it. The undersigned gives up any claim now or at any time later to the house or to anything in the estate. I read off his own page, level, and set it back down flat on the console. That isn't a piece, Grant. That's you asking me to sign away a thing you have decided I'm too dim to know I'm holding, and you didn't write it 20 minutes ago. You've had it folded in that jacket since the old man from the cottage came through the side door and you lost your color across the room.
Sign the peace agreement tonight, and we forget all this.
I don't sign anything I haven't read. I let a beat run out between us, and now I've read it. Then I did the thing that came within an inch of ending the whole night in that alcove. I took my own copy out of my breast pocket, folded soft as cloth from a year in a drawer and an hour flat against my ribs, and I laid it on the console beside his 20-minute piece, closed, unopened, just so that he could see there was such a thing in the world as a paper with weight standing behind it, and that the one they had all agreed was nothing had walked in through the front door carrying one. I wanted his face at the sight of it. I got his face. What I had never once in 40 years of being his brother paid the right kind of attention to was how fast a man's hands move when the thing he is looking at frightens him.
What is that? What have you?
His hand came down over the paper and mine both, and it came back up with my copy shut inside his fist. And for one long second, the only proof I had carried into that room in my own pocket was closed in his. I felt the whole night tilt on it. The whole week of it balanced for that second on a folded page in my brother's hand, and I could see in his eyes that he was doing the arithmetic of a lit candle and a dark window and no one watching. I did not lunge, and not because I yet knew it was safe to stand still. I didn't lunge because lunging was the whole of what he wanted. His brother scrabbling at his fist in a corner, proving to the both of us that a folded page was the only thing holding me up off the floor. So I did the opposite. I closed my hand around his wrist and pressed my thumb down into the soft of it, hard, and I did not pull. I waited, letting the ache climb until his grip had to choose between my copy and his own hand. Then I drew the page back out of his fingers one at a time, unhurried, folded it away inside my jacket, and pressed the flap flat over it. Only with it back over my ribs did I let myself feel the thing that had kept my hand from going wild. The recorded original was buttoned into Alden's coat halfway to the kitchen, and that was the page a clerk downtown would answer for tomorrow, not this soft, creased twin of it. But knowing that an hour ago and feeling my own proof shut inside my brother's fist just now were two different animals, and for the length of that grab, I had learned how thin a floor can go under a man who thought he'd nailed every board of it down.
You think a piece of paper.
You can keep yours, I said, over the top of it. I'll keep mine. This was the point where I stopped guarding what I had and started using it. I could have walked out of that alcove with my copy back over my heart and called it a save. The small win, the kept peace, the room left before it got worse. But Dale Rourke had come off the bar. He was at the mouth of the alcove now, near enough that when I spoke again I pitched it low and even and let it carry to him, and let my brother go on believing it was still just the two of us in a nook nobody could hear. You're in a real hurry to close all this off before anybody thinks to ask whose name is actually on the villa, I said. Why is that, Grant?
The name on that house is the name that has always been on it. It came out a half step too fast and a full step too loud, and I watched him hear himself do it. Mine. Every person in this family knows it. and you want to stand in a corner and make a scene over a deed you couldn't read if I laid it flat in your 2 hands.
Whose name is on it? Dale had crossed the rest of the way in quiet, and he put the question to Grant, not to me. You told me it was as good as signed. You sat in my office and showed me a page with a parcel number on it and told me that place was mine to lend against. So say it plain. Whose name is on the deed, Grant?
Dale. Not here. My brother's voice dropped and thinned in the same breath. This is my brother having a bad night in front of company. It's Monday. You and I sit down alone, and I walk you through every page from the top, start to finish.
Monday, it's every page from the top. An hour ago, it was as good as signed, down on the console beside the folded piece, and the small click of it was louder than anything Grant had said. You've been wrong all night. The old judge from the cottage walks in and the color goes straight out of you. Your own brother lays a folded paper on a table and you snatch at it like it's on fire. Something is off in this room, Grant, and it is off in a tight circle right around you. He was already stepping back toward the arch. Monday, then, and I'll be bringing my own man to turn the pages this time.
Grant watched his money walk itself back across the floor toward the bar, and I think that was the moment he understood the thing he had spent all week building had opened a seam. No smile of his was going to close over. He gathered his 20-minute piece off the console, folded it small, worked it back inside his jacket, and turned to me with nothing brotherly left anywhere in his face.
This does not go the way you think it goes, he said. Low. For me alone now. You've got a folded paper and a grudge. I've got the room.
Enjoy the room, I said, and he went. Back out under the arch, straightening his jacket, picking his smile up off the floor for the 3rd time that night before he'd cleared the flowers. I stood one breath longer in the alcove with the browning flowers and my copy back over my heart and the near thing of it draining back out of my hands. That was when the gray suit reached me. Harold Alden came drifting along the wall with the mild, unmoored look of an old man who has lost the road to the gentleman's and is too proud to stop anyone and ask exactly the look he'd promised me an hour before. He stopped at my shoulder as though by pure accident, both of us facing out at the room rather than at each other, and he spoke without once turning his head my way.
I watched you take your paper back off him just now. Clean, no grabbing at it, no scene. A pause while a waiter passed with a tray. I want to tell you one thing before I go stand where I told you I'd stand, then I'll say no more about it.
He told it the way he seemed to tell everything. Flat. No lift going into it, and no lesson hung on the far end of it to make it mean more than it was.
A long time back I sat over a matter, a family and an old man who'd gone too soft in the mind to hold his own pen anymore. They moved his money out from under him while he was still drawing breath in the next room, and every last form they carried up to me was filled in correct, signed on the right lines, notarized, filed on the right days. In order. In order was the only thing the bench ever asked me to check, so I checked it and I found it in order and I let it pass and I drove myself home. He died about a year on from that afternoon. I have spent more nights than I would own up to a soul thinking about the paperwork in that one. He looked at me then, the once, straight on. I sat quiet the one time. I am not going to sit quiet a second time.
My hand had gone to the inside pocket where the watch had ridden for weeks, without my sending it there, and found it empty. The watch was out on the head table where I'd laid it an hour back. Face down, the 2 scratched words turned up for my brother to read. I let the hand fall. I didn't answer Alden. He hadn't left any room for an answer, and there wasn't one worth putting into the air anyway. Out on the floor, Grant had climbed back up to the head table and gotten his hand around the microphone, and the band read the shape of him standing there and let its song thin out and die away underneath. He rapped the head of the mic twice with a knuckle, and the flat knock of it walked out across 150 faces already turning toward the front of the room, toward the golden sun, toward the raised glass, toward whatever it was he was about to stand up and tell all of them. He was going to say the house was his. He hadn't managed to stop himself in any of the smaller rooms all week, and this was the largest one he would ever have. That was the whole of what I had been waiting on from the second I stepped back out of that gift room. So I let the room's attention run to the front, where my brother wanted every eye in the house pointed, and I moved my own the opposite way. No hurry in it, the way a man crosses a floor that answers to his name. Across the room, by the kitchen doors, Harold Alden caught my eye and waited. I nodded once. Harold Alden set his glass on the nearest table, buttoned his jacket, and stood. He didn't hurry. A man of 71 crossing the last dozen feet of a wall he has stood against all night does it the way he does everything, one unbothered step after the next. And by the time the near tables had begun to wonder why the lost old gentleman from the cottage was drifting up toward the head of the room, my brother had already brought the microphone to his mouth and given me the one sentence I'd left a gift room and pried a folded page back out of his fist to hear him say.
Look around you a second. The room hushed for the golden sun the way it had hushed for him his whole life. My grandfather built this house with his own 2 hands, and tonight it's full of the people he'd have wanted standing in it. This is our home. It's been a Vance house for 50 years, and it'll be a Vance house for 50 more. My house, and one day my children's, and every one of you is welcome under this roof for exactly as long as I hold the keys. He lifted his glass toward the walls he believed were his, to family.
They drank to it. 150 glasses went up under a ceiling with my name on the paper that held it, and my brother stood at the head of a table he had handed a stranger my chair from an hour before and told a room full of witnesses that he owned the ground they were standing on. That was the sentence. I had given him every smaller room all week to say it in, and he had saved it for the largest one he would ever stand in front of and put it through a microphone to applause. So I crossed the floor toward him, no hurry in it, the way a man walks over ground that answers to his name. Grant watched me come with the glass still in his hand and the smile still bolted on for the near tables, and when I got close enough that the 2 of us were the only ones inside it, he brought the microphone down and away from his mouth and leaned in. And the thing he said low, flat, in the voice he kept for when there was no longer anyone worth performing for.
I knew whose name the old man put on the house. His breath was warm and even at my ear. I've known the better part of a year. I just wasn't going to sit here and split what's mine with somebody who was never really one of us.
And there it was, out of his own mouth, an inch from my face. Not a man who'd been cut out of something and come back swinging for his share, but a man who had read the whole of it a year ago, seen exactly where the ground lay under his feet, and decided the thing to do about it was make certain no one in this family ever looked down long enough to notice. He hadn't been kept in the dark and lashed out. He'd known. Every cruel thing all week had been the work of a man who knew there was a clean road open and chose the other one on purpose. I took my copy of the deed out of my breast pocket and set it down on the white cloth beside his plate, next to our grandfather's watch, still lying face down where I'd left it an hour back. Not handed to him. Set down, flat, where the whole head table watched a folded paper land by the golden sun's dinner. Read that one out loud, Grant, I said. That was the whole of what I gave him, and then Harold Alden was at his elbow. He had not crossed a foot of open floor. He came out of the wall by the kitchen doors a dozen feet off Grant's chair, already standing in the one spot every eye in the house was pointed, so that to the room he did not arrive at the argument so much as turn out to have been standing at the head of it the whole time. He didn't reach for the microphone. He had the kind of voice 30 years on a bench leaves in a man, the kind that carries into the back of a hall without ever being lifted.
I'll take 1 minute of your evening, and then I'll give it back. Chairs stopped scraping. I live in the cottage next door to this house, and 2 weeks ago I buried Walter Vance. Before he died, he left 3 things in my keeping and 1 instruction, and the instruction was that I open them out loud in this house on the night this family stood up and decided among themselves which of his grandsons was nobody. He let that sit a beat. Grant has just told all of you whose house this is. I'd rather let the county tell you.
He drew the folder from inside the gray coat, opened it flat between 2 water glasses, and slid a single page clear of the others. He turned it so the head table could see it and laid 1 blunt finger at the bottom under a block of purple ink.
This is the deed to the house you're all sitting in. Not a copy, the recorded original, with the county's stamp pressed into the foot of it, and the date they entered it into the public book where any stranger off the street can go and read it. His finger stayed where it was. That date is a year ago, near enough to the week. A full year before tonight, this house stopped belonging to any estate and belonged, whole and outright, to 1 man. It doesn't run through Grant. It never touched Grant. Walter signed this house over to his grandson Elliot a year before a single person in this room raised a glass to anybody.
150 people did the arithmetic at once, in the quiet. and I watched it move across the near tables like a draft through a house. A woman 2 tables back set her glass down without finishing the toast still in it. A man beside her leaned to a neighbor and said a number, low, and the neighbor set it back to be sure of it. A year ago, before the toasts, before the engagement, before a single word of any of it, the golden sun had been standing at the head of a floor that was already gone out from under him, telling everyone he could reach that it was his. At a table near the front, Dale Rourke stood up. He didn't put it to Alden, and he didn't put it to the room. He said it straight across the room, at my brother.
You told me the estate was yours. He was already buttoning his jacket. You sat across the desk from me and you showed me papers. And you told me this place was as good as signed to you. Whose papers were those, Grant?
Dale, sit down. This is a misunderstanding that I will walk you through.
You'll walk me through nothing. You'll explain it in a courtroom, with a lawyer of mine standing there asking how a house that was never yours ended up signed against my money. He pulled his chair out of his own way and set it back with a control that was worse than any noise he could have made. Whatever this house is, it isn't collateral, and it was never yours to lend me against. And he turned and walked the length of the room, and the guests near the aisle drew their chairs in to let him past, and nobody at the head table said a word to stop the one man in the house who had come as my brother's friend and was leaving as the first crack in him. The far doors opened for him and swung shut.
It was my Aunt Marlene who tried to close the door the county had opened. She came half up out of her chair with both hands flat on the cloth, the way she'd risen 100 times all week to steer a room back onto the rails she wanted it on, and she pitched her voice bright and hard across the front of it.
What hope do you have wedding her night? And I don't care what Walter left you, Harold. A man does not stand up in the middle of a girl's reception and wave a stack of old paper around. Whatever this is, it keeps until morning.
He told me the day, Marlene. Not the morning after it, the day, and the room, and the names of the people who'd be sitting in it, and he had every one of them right. Alden did not turn his head to her. I've 1 page left. Then the night is yours again, and you can all of you decide what to do with it.
She looked left and right along the table for the murmur that had carried her every day this week, and it wasn't there. The room had already done its counting and turned with it, and she was standing alone above the cloth with her hands flat on it. She sat back down. Then Alden took the last thing out of the folder, a plain envelope, my grandfather's hand slanted across the front of it, the seal still whole, and he broke that seal in front of all of them, drew out the page inside, and read it in the same voice he'd used for everything else, the one thing in the whole room that had not once climbed.
Harold, if you're reading this out loud, then it's happened. This family has stood up somewhere and decided between them which of my grandsons was the nobody. I asked you to wait for that exact day. I knew it was coming, and I found I wanted to be in the room for it after all, even from where I am now.
Not a person moved. My brother had set the microphone down on the cloth without seeming to know he'd done it, and he was looking at the envelope in Alden's hand, the way he'd looked at my folded copy in the alcove, like a thing that was on fire.
I had 2 grandsons. One of them shares my blood. The other came to us at 4 years old, and in 40 years I never once let that word cross the doorstep of my house, and I am not going to let it decide one thing now that I'm gone from it. So I'll say it plain the one time and then leave it alone. Blood never decided who my grandson is. The Tuesdays did.
I heard the word land, adopted, the thing this family had folded away for 40 years and never once spoke, said out loud at last in front of the 150. And I heard my grandfather take it off the table in the very same breath he'd set it down, so that no one in the room could pick it up and swing it. He hadn't named it to shame my brother with it. He'd named it so that no one after him listening could pretend that was the thing that had cost Grant the house. It wasn't. What had cost Grant the house was standing at the head of the table with a dead microphone in front of him and a deed by his plate he'd been begging me to read.
For 2 years, a man drove me across this county and back to a hospital I never once wanted to walk into, and he sat in the chair beside mine with his coat still on while they ran the line into my arm, and he never let me thank him for it, and never asked me for one thing in return. The rest of you looked at a man with that much time to give and decided he must not have had anything else worth doing. I looked at the same man and decided the exact opposite. So here is what I did about it while I still had the hands to do it. I put this house in Elliot's name and I had it recorded downtown. where no argument any of the rest of you invents can ever reach it, and I did it long before tonight. What's left after the house is written into the trust Harold is holding, and it goes exactly where it was always going to go, to the grandchild who actually sat with me. Every one of you who ever asked where I'd disappeared to on a Tuesday already knows his name.
An hour ago, my brother had stood in this same spot and raised his glass to a joke at my expense. The family's spare son, the one kept around so the rest could feel lucky by the comparison. Now the room had heard the other half of that sentence read out of a dead man's own hand, the grandchild who actually sat with me, and it had heard both halves under the same roof on the same night, and every face at the near tables had turned, one table at a time, to find out which of the two Vance sons was which. And when they had it sorted, when the near tables had put the blood grandson and the adopted one in their proper places at last, the eyes came looking for me. Not for the man at the microphone, for the one who an hour ago had picked up his own chair and carried it to the back wall and set it down among the caterers, because he'd been told out loud there was no place for him at his own family's table. I was standing at the head of that table now, beside a folded deed and a face-down watch, and I did not say a single word to any of them. I'd given my one line to my brother, and there was nothing I needed to add on top of it. I let the paper on the cloth do the rest, the way it had been quietly doing for a year while the whole family stood around on top of it. Grant found his voice, or the shape of it. He reached for the microphone on the cloth and got his fingers around it and lifted it toward his mouth, and the whole room waited to see what a man says at the head of a table that has just been read out from under him. Nothing came. His mouth worked once around a first word and let it go. He set the microphone back down. He looked down the table at our father and our mother. The first time all night I'd seen him turn to them for anything, the way he must have turned to them across 30 years of rooms and always found them getting to their feet to carry him. Warren looked at the cloth. Diane looked at her own hands. Neither of them rose. Then he reached instead for his champagne, the way a man reaches for anything at all to have somewhere to put his hand, and his grip went wrong on the stem, and when he set the glass down on the mirrored top of the cake table beside him, it went down at a tilt and too hard, and the stem cracked with a small, clean sound that carried the length of that silent room like a struck note. And in the quiet after it, every face at the head table, the aunt who had run the smear all week, the guests who'd been invited to laugh, the ones still holding their toast glasses half lifted, turned, as one thing, away from my brother and away from me, and settled on the two people who had sat through all of it at the center of the table without once standing up for their son. Claire had come out from under our mother's hand at last. She was on her feet with both hands over her mouth. But the room wasn't looking at her either. The room had found Warren and Diane, and it was waiting. Grant was out of things to say, and my mother and father were about to discover in front of the 150 guests they had invited to watch me lose that they had exactly one thing left to do. My father is not a man who stands up in a room. For 64 years he had let other people do the standing, his own father first and then his older son, and got to his feet only once someone ahead of him had already taken the weight of a room onto their back. So when Warren Vance put both hands flat on the white cloth and pushed himself up with nobody rising in front of him, the 150 understood, before he had said a single word, that a thing in this family which had always been carried was being made at last to carry itself. He did not reach for the microphone Grant had left lying on the cloth between them. He would not have trusted his hands with it, and I don't think he wanted its help.
I watched them do it to you all week. His voice did not carry the way the judges had. The room leaned in to catch it, and the leaning was a quiet of its own. And I watched them do it again tonight, and every single time I told myself it was easier than the fight. This was my father's house, and I sat in it and let them stand my own son at the edge of his sister's wedding and lift a glass to him for it, and I called that keeping the peace. It was not peace. It was easier, and I chose easier every day it was put in front of me, and there is no gentler word for what I did than that one. I'm sorry, Elliot, not for tonight, for every day I saw it plain and looked down at the floor instead of at you.
My mother made it halfway out of her chair and no further. She rose the way she had risen all week to steer a room somewhere, except this time there was nowhere in the world she was allowed to steer it, and her hands were not steady on the cloth.
That Christmas, 2 years ago, she stopped and made herself begin it again. You came in still in your coat from driving him home, and I said a thing to a cousin about you finally finding a use for yourself, and I said it to be funny, and the whole table laughed because I was the one who gave them leave to. He was asleep out in the car, 20 feet away in the dark, warm, with the heater you'd left running for him before you came inside. I made a joke of the one person in this family who was doing the thing I should have been doing, and I forgave myself for it that same night because he never woke up to hear it. She looked up at me for the first time. I have thought about those 20 feet more than you would ever let me tell you. I have nothing that makes it all right. I know that I don't.
I let the quiet hold a moment before I gave either of them anything back. There was a version of that minute where I made the two of them stand in it exactly as long as they had left me standing at the edge of their evening, and the 150 would have handed me that gladly. I didn't want it. My grandfather had spent the last careful act of his life keeping one cruel word off this family's table so that no one could ever pick it up and swing it, and I was not going to reach past him now and pick up a duller one to swing myself. You both said the true thing, I told them. That's the part I needed said out loud, in this room, in front of these people, so sit down. I'm not going to hold you up here and make a second show out of it. I let a breath go by. Believing you're sorry and calling this mended are two different rooms, and I'm only standing in the first one tonight, but I am standing in it. That's not nothing. We'll see about the rest another day. Warren sat. After a moment, my mother sat down beside him. Down the table, Marlene had gone very small and very quiet, and for the first time in the whole week, there was no murmur anywhere in the room left for her to climb up onto. Grant did not look at me. He sat at the head of a table that had never once been his hand resting against the cracked glass where it stood on the mirrored cake table beside him, and I did not say his name, and I did not reach for him. There was a Monday coming somewhere past this night, with a desk in it and Dale Rourke on the far side of the desk and a lawyer turning pages, and a hard question about a house my brother had borrowed against that was never his to lend a stranger a cent of. That Monday belonged to the two of them. It could sit where it was and wait for them both. It was not mine to carry out onto the floor, and I was finished carrying my brother's weight anywhere at all. A door a man shuts on purpose is a different thing from one the wind takes, and I let his stay shut. Something moved across the 150, while the two of them settled back into their chairs. The shift a room makes a half-second before anyone in it can name what changed. The same near tables that had lifted their glasses to my brother's joke an hour before could not now find 1 square inch of me to rest their eyes on. A woman 2 rows back, who had clapped at the toast, sat turning her napkin over and over in her lap and looking down at the napkin. Nobody stood up to take a second vote. They did the recounting in the quiet instead. One lowered face at a time, and I felt the whole room swing without a single new word being spent on me. Then I did the one thing I had actually climbed to the head of that table to do. I picked my own copy of the deed back up off the cloth. The soft folded page I'd set by his plate a few minutes and a whole other life ago, folded it once more along its year-old crease, and put it away inside my jacket over my ribs, where it had ridden all night. Then I said the rest of it plain, out to where the far half of the 150 could hear me. Nobody is packing anything. I sent it down the length of the table and out past the end of it. The house has been mine for a year, and it is going to go on being the house my grandfather built and the house my sister was married in tonight. No one is moving out of it because a page finally got read in the open. It stays a family house. I am not selling it, and I am not emptying it, and whatever my grandfather set aside beyond it, he left the way he wanted it left. I am not going to be the man who turns any of that into money. I looked at Grant the one time. None of that was ever mine to decide. He decided it, a year ago, while every one of you was still busy deciding who I was. Minutes before, at that same head of that same table, my brother had raised a glass, and told this room they were welcome under his roof for exactly as long as he held the keys to it. I'd had the keys in my pocket the whole time he was talking. The house would keep saying that for me. Every day it went on standing full and open with my grandfather's name still worked into the grain of the door frames, and I saw no reason to say it twice. Over by the kitchen doors, Harold Alden had already gathered his 3 papers back into the gray folder, the recorded deed, the trust, and the letter with my grandfather's broken seal, and squared them against the tabletop the way a man squares a job he has finished. He crossed to me on his way out and stopped at my shoulder the one time more.
That's my part done. He held the folder flat against his chest. He asked me to wait for your word and then read out what he left, and I have done the both of them, and now I'm going to walk home over the hedge before somebody hands me a plate of cake I'll only feel obliged to finish. Walter would rather have watched the dancing than any of the rest of this business. He tipped his head toward Claire. And you're the only man in this room with a dance owed to him. Go and take it. I'll let myself out the door I came in by.
The band had not touched a note since Grant rapped a knuckle on the microphone a handful of minutes and a whole lifetime ago. Into all that silence, the one person who had tried to cross the room to me twice tonight and been held at the table both times finally made the whole way over. Claire came down off the head table with her veil bunched in one fist, and she did not stop at the careful arm's length the rest of them had spent the evening learning to keep from me. She took my hand in both of hers, hard.
You are dancing with me, and don't you dare tell me you're not. Her chin was doing the thing it used to do at 10, when she was losing an argument she was right about. I kept one back. After the dance with Dad, I told the band to hold a song and not tell a soul who it was for, and I let everyone think I'd only forgotten to name it. She pulled at my hand. It was yours the whole night, he told me, Elliot. Before he went, he told me you swore to him I'd have my dance even if he wasn't in the room to see it. Made you promise it in that hard hospital chair with the lines still running into his arm, and he was so pleased he'd gotten it out of you that he told me this story twice. Her voice went the whole way through. He loved you most. He just was never loud about it.
I'm not going to argue with the bride, I said, and it came out rougher than I had let one word come out all night. There was one thing left on the cloth to take up with me, and I reached back for it before I let her lead me anywhere. My grandfather's watch, face down on the white table where it had lain the whole night through, the scratched steel of it turned up at a family that had spent the evening certain it was reading the proof of a man with nothing better to do. I worked the back of the case open with my thumbnail, the way I'd watched him do it 100 times in 100 rooms neither of us ever once said the name of out loud, and I read the 2 words scratched inside it. Every Tuesday. 2 years of them. 2 years of driving him there and driving him home, and this whole family had looked at a grown man with that many free afternoons and read the entire measure of what I wasn't in it. He had looked at the same 2 words and written a house. I closed the case and slid the watch into the breast pocket over my heart, next to the folded deed, and of the 2 things riding there I already knew which one I would have gone back into a fire for. Then I let go of the edge of that table for the first time since I had walked up to it, and I let my sister pull me out onto the floor of my grandfather's house. Marcus stood at the near side of it and let his wife dance the first turn of her married life with her brother, and if it cost him anything, he had the grace not to let it show. The band found the song Claire had hidden from all of them, and we danced, in front of 150 people who had come to watch me lose, and not one of them had a word left to spend on it. We turned once around the middle of the floor, and I felt the shape of the man who was not in the room settle into the space between my hand and my sister's. He had asked for this, and not lived the 2 weeks it would have cost him to stand at the edge of it and watch her go around the floor of the house he'd built. That was its own ache, off to one side of everything the family had spent the night doing, and there was nobody inside it to be angry at. So I held it where it was, and I danced with Claire, and I let the missing of him be the one thing in that whole room I had no argument with. The watch runs 4 minutes fast. I have never once set it right. It lives in the top drawer of my nightstand now, and it still gains its 4 minutes on the world. And every morning I wind it and leave it wrong on purpose, because 4 minutes fast is exactly how he carried it, and I would sooner keep his time than the correct one. My mother and father crossed 1,000 floors for my brother across 30 years, and not one of them for me. And that night, far too late to be worth very much, they finally stood up, and I stood in front of 150 people and told them I believed them, and left it there. If your own family had gotten to its feet and decided who you were, if they had handed your chair to a stranger and raised a glass to you for it, what would you have set down on the table before you walked? Until next time,